Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out. So this is very exciting for us because this is the first time we've had something like this. This is great. We're getting into another level. So without any further ado, I want to introduce Miriam Brouwer. And Miriam lives in southwestern Ontario, so she's part of our lockdown. And she bought her first bike when she was 20 years old. And she graduated from U of T. And she has a master's of science in honors in speech and language and pathology. Miriam is a professional track cyclist and part of the Canadian National Track Endurance Development Team. She's currently Canadian National Team Pursuit Champion, Canadian Champion, Canadian National Madison Champion, as well as the provincial Omnium Race Champion. Miriam has won many multiple medals in both in the Milton World Cup and the Pan Am Games. This is just a little segment, how Miriam feels about us. And she, quote unquote, she says, "I was really interested in participating in this event. After looking into the programming at Kayla's Children's Center, I think the work they do is so meaningful, and I love their creative approach to therapy." So welcome to our family, Miriam, and I'm going to turn it over to you without any further ado. And I wish you a lot of luck with a lot of these guys here, because I tell you, they're a motley group. I love them. Miriam.
Thank you so much. That was, I mean, what else do I have left to say, really? I guess I don't have to say too much. It looks like we've got a great group here tonight. I hear that a lot of you have been doing quite a bit of riding, which is awesome. So I have a few slides and stuff to go through, just with some notes, and hopefully we can cover some of the questions that got sent in, and then if anything else comes up, we can have like a question and answer period at the end, and we can get through whatever else pops into your head. If you're worried about losing what you want to ask, just pop it into the chat, and we can address it at the end. Okay, here we go. So there is my screen. We'll go big. So as Hershey has already introduced me, my name is Miriam. I'm part of the Canadian track cycling team, and a speech language pathologist. So as he said, I really do think when I was asked to be a part of this event, I looked into Kayla's Children's Center, and I thought, you know what, this is fantastic. It's really in line with a lot of what I do in my professional career as a speech pathologist, and I love bikes and riding bikes, so why not? Two of my favorite things. So let's just get into it. So I started riding a bike when I was about 19 or 20. I was a little overweight and pretty unhappy with my fitness and that sort of thing. So I signed up for a gym, hired a personal trainer and a nutrition consultant, and just kind of committed to getting fit. A couple months later, I bought a bike as a way to like kind of maintain that fitness out of the gym. And honestly, I hated it. I hated riding my bike. The first 6 or 7 months of riding was terrible. It was really just a means to an end. But as I kept riding, you get faster, you start to get more comfortable being alone with your thoughts for really long periods of time. And eventually, I guess I just started enjoying it enough to ride more and ride longer and ride faster and ride with more people, and eventually entered my first race. So the picture on the top left, where I'm looking like a recreational cyclist, that was my very first race in 2014. That's me crossing the finish line in first, but I had no idea, because that's how new I was to the idea of road racing. So as I got started in racing, I kind of just did everything. I raced every race I could get get to locally. So raced on the road. I did some mountain biking as part of the U of T collegiate mountain bike team, and I did a lot of cyclocross racing because it's a lot of fun and it's got some great atmosphere. You really learn how to handle your bike, and they're like the hardest 1 hour of bike riding of your life, until you switch into track cycling, that is. Um, so it's a lot of fun. So that's kind of why I got started. Around 2017 or 2018, I kind of just settled in on road racing. I was racing as part of the cyclery team out of Ottawa, and we were racing nationally and throughout North America at UCI races and a few local ones thrown in there. So mostly time trials like you see on the left, and road racing, lots of criteriums in North America, which are, again, like hard 1 hour races. So that was kind of where I set my focus. Then at the end of 2018, my team director on the road became the director of the development track cycling team. So I just kind of chatted with her and said, I'd like to give this a shot. She said, come in, we'll do some testing. So I did a bunch of power testing. We have to do, our testing protocol is a max 30-second, 4 minutes recovery, a max 4-minute in aero position, 30 minutes of recovery, and then a maximal 10-minute in aero position. So within 1 hour, you do your best 30-second, 4-minute, and 10-minute. I guess I was good enough to impress a little bit, and was welcomed into the development track team. Fast forward maybe 3 months, and we were off to the Pan American Championships. I was an alternate and just kind of there to observe, but race day number 1 didn't go very well. So then I was thrown into the lineup of the team pursuit, which was the opening slide of this presentation, is team pursuit cycling. And we won a bronze medal at Pan American Championships. So that was my first track race ever, which was a lot of fun. From there, I kind of took on some Madison racing. So that's what you see on the top left there. Madison is an event where you race with a partner. One of you is in the race, in the action of the race on the bottom half of the track, and the partner is on relief at the top of the track. And when you come underneath your relief rider, they ride down the track, meet up with you. The faster rider grabs the hand of the slower rider and throws them into the race, and you just take turns like that. And it's a points qualification race, so you get points every 10 laps. So very complex, and the best race ever, really. It's so much fun. It's really dynamic, and you have to be really focused and on the whole time. So got to race that at the Pan American Games in Lima in 2019, which was definitely a huge highlight to be able to compete in that games experience. And then we were able to medal at the Milton World Cup, which was the last track cycling event before the world shut down last January. So that was kind of a great way to, go into a lockdown. And here we are. So currently I'm an alternate for the Tokyo Olympics, a non-traveling alternate. So just waiting in the wings, staying fit, and really hoping for Canada's sake that nothing happens to our current riders, because they're super strong, and I really trust them to represent us well. So that's me, and that's my cycling. So I just wanted to go through a little bit like what it looks like to train and race as a professional. And then we'll kind of go into some tips and tricks for getting your best 100K in a few months. So for me, I'm on the bike 6 days a week. I usually get one total rest day and one really easy day of like 1 to 2 hours of pretty chill riding. Um, and I usually aim for 15 to 20 hours of on bike time weekly. Um, that goes up a little bit if I'm on like a big training camp, like, in previous years, we would train in Spain over the winter for a few weeks at a time. And then I would probably be riding 25 to 30 hours those weeks. Unfortunately, those weeks happened here on my trainer this year, but still got lots of volume. I also am in the gym twice a week. So the primary focus as a track cyclist is a lot of strength and muscular coordination, activation, and like speed work. So lots of weighted jumps and that sort of thing. So we'll talk a little bit about ideas for what you can do in the gym to kind of accentuate and accelerate your cycling performance. As a road cyclist, definitely the focus was not as gym heavy, but on the track, it's a lot more. I guess eating and nutrition is a huge part of being a professional cyclist. So this is the technical mumbo jumbo, but we aim for 6 to 8 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram daily during training weeks. So if I'm training for 15 to 20 hours a week, then I'm eating upwards of 360 grams of carbs a day, which means a lot of rice and potatoes. That goes up depending on competition and down a little bit if I have rest weeks. And then there's a lot of technical focus. So you can see for track cycling, position is really important. So those aerodynamics are super important. And then like skills training for things like Madison racing specifically. And then a lot of mental performance training. So especially right now when we're not doing a lot of racing, there's a lot of like visualization and that sort of thing for track racing, which is really, really helpful. Okay, so that's what training as a professional looks like. So let's kind of go through some ideas of what you can do to prep. I mean, I hear that a lot of you have been doing a bunch of riding, so hopefully you can find something useful in here that you can incorporate if you're not already doing that. And I've gotten a bunch of questions from people, and so I'll try to address them. If I don't hit it, please ask me again at the end. So let's talk about training. I think the best approach for everyone going into a big event is to kind of sit down and think about what you want the event to look like, how you want it to go. Do you have like a specific speed goal? Do you have someone you're competitive with and you just want to like keep up with them or beat them? Or do you want to limit the amount of time you stop during the ride? Feel like you can get over the hills better? Just kind of set those goals and incorporate those into your training so that when it comes to your event day, you can really find success at that time. So pick the things that aren't your strong suits, whether that's climbing or descending or just having like, I think one of the biggest learning curves is just being comfortable going really fast, especially around other people, and just target those. Has anyone here not ridden 100K in one go? Okay, a few people. So, I mean, honestly, everybody is really capable of doing this. My very first 100-kilometer ride was also my first 100-mile ride. So most of your limits are in your head. So I think a big goal for everybody leading into this is, like, if you're unsure of whether or not you're going to be able to do it or do it well or do it fast enough, just start with that visualization piece and tell yourself you can do it, and your body's going to do the things that you tell it you can do. If you tell your body that you can't do something, you will react to that and you will perform more poorly. Just because the event's 100K doesn't mean that's what your training always has to be. But if you try to get in at least a 75K, so you just kind of feel comfortable on your bike, those last 25K, when you've got the motivation of being like around other people, it'll be a breeze. Honestly, you'll get through it, no problem. As far as what the best approach to training is, I would say as much as you can do, the more you train, the faster you're going to be. So if you have time, I know everyone has to work around work schedules and that sort of thing. I totally understand that. But just get out there and love riding your bike. Do as much as you can. If you don't have time to do high hours or high volume, add in some intensity. A great way to get some strength. Someone asked a question, how do you get the endurance and the strength when you can't hit the gym or anything like that? So one way that I really work on bike strength is doing low cadence intervals. So hitting a hill or like a long flat headwind section, putting it into a really big gear and just getting that strength adaptation from riding with my cadence around 65 to 70 RPMs. It's pretty painful, but it definitely can help you get those strength gains without access to a lifting room. So in terms of strength training, I think this is actually a really big place where gains can be made in short periods of time, and mostly just in activating the major muscle groups. So a lot of people, when they start out cycling, you end up being really quad heavy. So your pedaling is with just the quads. Because that's a pretty major muscle group. It's kind of like climbing the stairs. So those ones are always kind of turned on and ready to go. Especially if you're riding with flat pedals, that's definitely the go-to to put out power. So I think the biggest thing training wise that you can do to make a difference is start working on and activating other major muscle groups. So think about activating the glutes, hamstrings, shoulders, upper body a little bit to kind of maintain that stability on the bike, and core. I think to incorporate some of that into your training, and especially just before you go out on a hard ride, to do even 5 or 10 minutes of activation is just going to make sure that you're utilizing all of your major muscle groups and not fatiguing, just one muscle group. So it'll really improve your endurance overall. You might find out that you don't really know how to activate your glutes or hamstrings on their own. So, that's something that you could definitely work on and kind of get going. Figure out if you are actually using your posterior chain muscles at all when you're cycling, because that can make a massive difference in your ability to ride for long periods of time. Somebody else asked about stretching. So, like, do you incorporate stretching into your routine? Do you stretch before a ride, after a ride? I personally incorporate stretching. I tried to mindfully incorporate stretching twice a week. So 2 like 30 to 40-minute sessions of rolling on a foam roller to work out all those muscle kinks and then stretching afterwards. But it's pretty much a daily thing post-workout for me to stretch. Pre-workout, I don't really. I would focus more on activation. But that's going to differ depending on you. And I think just like figure out what works best for you and try things. And if it doesn't work, don't do it. If it works, keep going. Yeah, I think that covers most things, but those are the things that you might not be incorporating that you could be. And there's no magic formula. If you add in something, you will be better than you were if you didn't. So I think that's my advice there. Okay, I think that nutrition, definitely one of the biggest things that you can do to improve your performance without training. So when I started racing, I started working with a specific sports nutritionist, and it was the number one thing to make me be able to consistently complete every single workout at a maximal level and show up at the start line of a race knowing that my legs were going to show up too, and just being totally confident in my ability to perform in that race. Obviously, you can't control the heat, or you can't control what other people do, or how strong other people are, or whether you're going to be able to keep up, but you can control how prepared you are, and nutrition is one of the most important ways to do that. I wrote there that event day is not the day to lose weight, like training day is not the day to lose weight. So you might have weight loss goals or health goals, nutrition goals. Start implementing them now, start working towards that now, because if you decide not to eat on a big training day, you're not going to be able to perform as well as you would if you ate beforehand. So you won't actually burn as many calories because you didn't fuel your workout properly. So it's really worth it to eat before, during, and after workouts, immediately after workouts. And then, I don't care what you do the rest of the time. But those 3 times are super key when you're going for a workout. Somebody did ask how much before a ride do you eat? So I'm assuming that was like how soon before. So I do my last big meal 2 to 3 hours before an intense workout. So if it's a race, especially 2 to 3 hours before, otherwise, it might make a reappearance within the race, which is the last thing you want. I will target 100 to 150 grams of carbohydrates in that last meal, which, is like a really big bagel and a banana and a glass of juice and jam on my bagel, and maybe peanut butter and like yogurt with some seeds or something on top. Like, it's a lot. So you can eat more carbs pre-workout than you think. During workouts, and during like intense rides, hard rides, it's really important to eat and drink a lot. So I tend to aim for 60 grams of carbs an hour. That's like for a pretty high intensity workout. If it's more just like an aerobic, riding around with my friends, whatever, then then I'll do more like 40. But if it's a hard workout or if it's going to be a big day, 60 grams of carbs. So that's like a bottle of drink mix and a banana, or a bottle of mix and a gel, or a banana and a gel, whatever, whatever you find works best for you. So someone asked what my go-to is. I definitely switch it up. My favorite drink mix is Scratch Labs. That's SKRATCH, I think, Labs. It is the one drink mix that I can always count on in a race not to give me GI issues, even if I'm going really hard. And I can use it on back-to-back days without having stomach pains. Different sugars work differently for different people, but that's one that pretty much everybody I know can use consistently and feel good with. So I think it's pretty worth it. In terms of food, I really do mix it up. I try to avoid using gels and bike specific food unless I'm racing. In training, Scratch Labs actually has really great recipes for training food, like rice bars, and bananas are great. They're really nice and high in carbohydrate. Or whatever I baked that week, I'll just throw it in my pockets. Cookies, oatmeal cookies, that sort of thing. That's my go-to for training. For racing, I do a mix of gels and like gummy candies and stuff like that. I would say, like, use your training to practice nutrition. It's hard to get enough food in while you're in an event, so practice getting 60 grams of carbs an hour. See how good you feel at the end of a group ride, you know, see if you can win that end of the group ride sprint and you know, still have a maximal effort at the end of 100 kilometers. I think you'll be surprised, if you don't normally eat on the bike, how good you feel at the end of a ride if you do eat on the bike. Yeah, don't try to switch too much between your training and your event day nutrition. I would try to practice something, find what works, and just use it every time. Okay, so the last kind of piece to make sure you have a great event is being prepared technically. I can send you guys these slides afterwards if anybody wants. So I think if you've never gotten a bike fit, get your bike fit. Make sure you're comfortable on it. It's a good position for you, all of that. Make sure your bike is working. So if you're having an issue, try to get it dealt with before the event, and don't try to change anything too massively the day of or before an event. I mean, pretty straightforward. I think, you know, everybody would know that kind of thing, but maybe not think of it while they're prepping. I think skills are also really important to work on, especially if you're worried about making it all the way through a 100-kilometer ride. Getting comfortable drafting, it's going to be your best friend, because you'll save so much energy. It's about 100 watts saved sitting on a wheel, as opposed to being the person that's like splitting the wind for everybody else. So if you've never heard of draft, but I'm going to assume that most of you know what that means. So practice that. Ride with somebody, sit on their wheel, get used to that, be comfortable with that. I got a question about gear selection. So maintaining pedal speed can help you when riding long distances. And that's really true. I mean, as a track cyclist, on the track, our average cadence is about 115 RPMs. You don't need to go that high. But typically when you're going for a longer ride, if you can avoid muscular fatigue from being in too big of a gear, then, you know, theoretically your muscles will feel better later into the ride because you've allowed them to not rely so much on that like heavy muscular activation. It's cadence is pretty individual. I tend to ride around like 90 RPMs when I'm doing an aerobic ride. That's like my average. But other people don't. My husband tends to ride around like 80 and be pretty comfortable there. So kind of try it out. See where you are comfortable, you know, do that 75K ride and see what kind of cadence works for you on that. But theoretically, going down one gear, especially when the road trends uphill, is going to help you out a lot. Okay, the clip question, clipping in and out. I don't recommend starting the day before an event, just like I said above. Don't change something the day before an event. But if you want to get started now, or you've just gotten started and it's not really, you're not really sure how it's going to work or how it's going, practice makes perfect. If you have an indoor trainer, set up inside and start practicing on a stationary bike. I like to do, or like when I started using toe clips, I did start inside for a little bit just to kind of get comfortable with that feeling. You know, you can practice getting off on both sides while you know you're not going to fall. And then when you're just kind of getting going, the biggest thing is just anticipating. So if you think you're going to stop, just unclip and be ready. And so what if you don't actually have to stop and you don't have to put your foot down and you have to re-clip in? It's not the end of the world. The better you get at riding with your toe clips, the less often you're going to have to unclip. But just be prepared. Take your foot out, hang it down if you want to, just so you have the weighting right on your bike so that if you do have to come to a stop, you're ready. Yeah, I think that's my primary tip for that. As far as practicing clipping in and out on both sides, it's worth it to be able to. Try doing both feet. I always unclip with my right foot, pretty much always. But if you're going to race cross, then you want to be able to do both. So yeah, that's a comfort thing. So try it, see how it goes. If you aren't comfortable with toe clips, don't use them. And don't put them on the day before a ride. Start now. Yeah, so, and then also practice eating and drinking while you're riding, because nutrition is going to make the biggest difference. Practice eating and drinking while you're in a group. Practice eating and drinking while you're drafting. That will be, that's it, just practice. We still work on skills all the time, from track standing to, you know, different more advanced skills like Madison slinging and riding with no hands and all of that fun stuff, and like reaching down and picking stuff up off the road. It's great to be able to do that sort of thing. You just get more comfortable on your bike. So the more you practice, the better it's going to be. All right, so that's all I've got to say, but I see that there's a lot of questions. This is Team Pursuit, by the way. It's a fun event. So let's go through this chat. Oh, okay. So if you don't eat bananas, eat rice bars or cookies. I like cookies. So bike shops. Is track racing dangerous? Track racing, I have definitely crashed more track cycling than I ever did road racing. And so yes, sometimes. Team pursuit is our primary event, and that's where you're racing only with your teammates. So hopefully you trust them and they're pretty stable and you kind of know how to ride with them. So then we don't crash. It's not, if you crash doing team pursuit, something went catastrophically wrong. Track cycling in Ontario can be done in Milton at the velodrome, and that's where most of our training takes place. There's also a tiny little track in London. It's only 133 meters around, and a normal track is 250 meters. So it's an adventure, kind of feels like riding a roller coaster. In pasta, look at the box. The box will tell you how many grams of carbs are in a cup of pasta. In terms of intermittent fasting, I really recommend eating 2 to 3 hours before your ride. If your ride's early in the morning, I don't do that, but then I just kind of do my intensity. If I'm doing anything like massively intense, like a max 2-minute interval, for example, then I'll like ride first for an hour and then hit the intensity. But I do have trouble with keeping food down while I'm riding. Not everybody does. So if you're one of the lucky people who can eat whatever you want and go out and smash 100 kilometers as hard as you can and not lose your lunch, then eat whenever you want. Or if you do have trouble with foods and you want to eat closer to your ride start, just avoid fats. So anything like yogurt, milk, that sort of thing might make it worse. So also most bike shops are open. I don't know in your area who's got a good reasonable time frame, but they are open. So drafting. The best drafting technique is to practice as much as you can. Get as close to the wheel as you can and start figuring out where the wind is coming from. So if you are riding straight into the wind, you want to be directly behind the person. So your front wheel is, about 7 or 8 inches behind theirs, but you're directly following them like a train car. If the wind is coming from your left side and blowing across the road like that, then you want to be sitting off to the right over here of that person. If you're riding in a big group, never ever overlap wheels. So that means don't let your front wheel be overlapped with the other person's back wheel, because then you will probably crash eventually. If not the first ride, then later you will. And then if the wind's coming the other way across the road, you sit on the other side. How's that drafting question, Daryl? Oh no, Maury, any other drafting questions? You can unmute yourself.
No, thank you. But I just need to get my riding partner to learn to draft and not race ahead.
Yeah, yeah.
You just have to keep up with me.
Good etiquette.
How should get on to him?
No half wheeling. That's bad etiquette. If you half wheel me, I will push it and like
Do you actually have any sample exercises for activating muscle or different muscle groups?
We can get into that for sure. So let me just go, I'm going to go through these chat questions really quickly, and then we'll talk about activation exercises. My heart rate is more variable by my power. So if I'm riding aerobic, like just a normal everyday kind of ride, I don't know if any of you use power, but like sitting between like 170 to 200 watts, my heart rate will be like 140 to 150. And that's usually at 90 RPMs. If I'm going harder, like climbing a hill, you know, maybe you're sitting at 300 watts or whatever, then my heart rate will jump up to like 180. But it doesn't usually, once you've gotten used to it, you shouldn't notice a heart rate change just because of your cadence change. That's aerobic conditioning. So hopefully as you do it more, you won't see that heart rate jump with more cadence. So for shorter training rides, adding carbs, I mean, it depends on how hard you're going. If I'm doing an easy short ride, like rest day, an hour and a half of easy riding, I don't eat or drink anything because there's not much point. But if you're going hard, just at least eat before. If it's only an hour, you can probably get away with not fueling during, but if it's more than an hour, add carbs. You will feel better, you will go harder, you will burn more calories. That's all I've got to say about that. So like, honestly, it's night and day. But if it's under an hour, especially if it's not intense, yeah, you don't need any extra food. Okay. Protein. Okay, I'll give you the technical mumbo jumbo for protein first. I usually aim for 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram. In case anybody is wanting to get that technical, I use the app MyFitnessPal to track my macronutrients and hit my goals for those. Usually I do that only in major training blocks leading into competition because it gets a little tedious to do it every day. And I've got a pretty good idea of how much I eat now after doing that for a long time. But yes, protein, you should really focus on protein at breakfast if you can stomach it, especially. It's a good way to get you set up for a good day. And post-workout, I usually try to incorporate protein. And I am definitely, the next question is like, do you use it instead of carbs or combined with carbs? I am a don't cut out any food groups person. All the food groups are kind of there for a reason, like all those macronutrients. So I don't try to limit carbs or fats or proteins ever. Some people I know use like ketogenic diets, or they'll use like different diet plans. I like to go with balance, but that's pretty individual. If you're really concerned about nutrition, reach out and find a sports nutritionist. There's you can send me an email and I can give you some names of ideas of people who do that are really good. VeloFix is great. There's a lot in the GTA, so you can definitely get them to come and do your bike fix, but I don't know what their turnaround time is. Zwift versus a Peloton. If you're riding, good for you. Whatever you like, get those pedals turning. Honestly, if riding Zwift gets you on a bike, ride Zwift. If riding a Peloton gets you on a bike, ride a Peloton. The more you do it, the better you're going to be. So for cadence and power, oh, there we've got a sports nutritionist name in there if anybody wants one, because it is honestly really, really beneficial. I'll add another one. This is who I used. So for cadence and power, all of my bikes right now have a like a power meter unit on them. So I have a different one on every single bike. I have an SRM on my track bike, and it does both cadence and power. On my road bike, I have a Quark, which I love. I've got a rotor on my cyclocross bike and another Quark on my time trial bike. And on my bunch racing track bike, I have a 4i, I think. I've used them all. Yeah, I know you can also get like the little cadence meters that just like slide onto your crank arm. Those work really well too. It's just like a magnet, like a little sticky magnet that you put on your frame, and like an elastic band that goes around your crank arm. Those work pretty well. And they're pretty cheap. So, you know, it's just like an easy addition to your bike. Okay, so we'll get into exercises and then we'll open the floor and anyone can just shout out a question. So activation exercises, we have a full routine of about 15 exercises that I do before every track session specifically. And I'll give you kind of the major muscle groups that we target. So we will start with shoulders. This is mostly key, like I do positioning specific work on the track, not super key for road racing, but shoulder activation is really helpful on the road. So typically I will do start in a plank position on my hands like this, not elbows, hands, and just kind of sink in. So you squeeze your shoulder blades together at the back and then push up and round your back all the way. I don't know what that is called, but I do find it works really well for just kind of getting those shoulder muscles activated, helps to like reduce shoulder and neck pain because you're actually using the muscles. I just realized I only sent my nutritionist name to Leah. Anyway, there we go. So then we will do glutes are a major one. They do typically need specific activation if you want them to work maximally while you're riding. So I start with glute bridges, which you can look up. There will be videos of that everywhere if you don't know what they are. So I'll do two-legged glute bridges, probably like 8 to 10 of them. And then I will do 2 that are up and hold for like 20 seconds. And really just focus on feeling that glute activation. And then typically we'll add in 5 or 6 single leg glute bridges per side to really get both glutes and hamstrings with that one, which is great. So that's where you do like one leg on the floor, one leg straight up in the air and up and down in a bridge. You can do some extra hamstring activation with a single leg RDL. So that's where you kind of, you start standing and then lean forward with one leg coming off the ground out behind you. So just kind of getting the leg activation with that. I tend to do some rotational kind of exercises. So you could do like a lunge where you twist at the bottom. So go down into your lunge and then like twist to both sides. And I like that one just to get kind of your upper back moving. and it gets the quads kind of fired up too. So that's a good one. I'll do like 5 per side of that. So these are kind of stretching too. With the lunges, I'll kind of do a little hip flexor stretch at the same time, because they're good for that. Then some core stuff. So you could do like a dead bug. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but you lay on your back, arms and legs up, and then drop like your opposite arm and opposite leg to the floor, and then pull them back up. So that's kind of like an easy core strength exercise that gets like the full core, both upper and lower half of your core muscles. And if you look up dead bug exercise, you will get a video of that too. I think that hits like the most major muscle groups. If you have the first exercise was just like shoulder, I don't know, shoulder, it's on your feet in a plank position. The cat-cow is on hands and knees. That's a good one too. More for like spine mobility. Yeah, I do that one too sometimes. Yeah, I think those are kind of my like top, that was 5, I think, right? Top 5 exercises. If you get a lot of neck pain, you can do chin tucks after your workout. Just like, give yourself a double chin, and it'll stretch those little muscles in the back of your neck, which tend to get really tight. Okay. Yeah, there you go. Like a little push-up, a mini push-up. Thanks, Eugene. Any other questions? Anybody? Feel free to shout them out now. You'll have to unmute yourself though if you are going to ask.
What do you think of gels? The hammer gels and stuff like that. Like when because it's recommended you should take it like 5 minutes before you start riding, and then one every 45 minutes. What's your thought process on that?
So for racing, I will use them. For training, I don't. I use real food usually, but if it works for you, use it. I definitely in racing will take one on the start line or like just before we go up to the start line. It's just that instant sugar hit is really helpful, and there's a lot of research to back that up actually. So the pre-hard effort gel I think is based really well in scientific research. And then during training, 60 grams of carbs an hour. So if gels are your preferred way of getting that, use a gel. If you'd rather use different food, use different food, whatever works for you. Gels typically are 30 grams of carbs. That's pretty much all of them. So I would do like 1 gel and a bottle of scratch mix in an hour. Or if you are drinking plain water, you could do 2 gels. For fruit, yeah, I mean, some fruits are better than others for training. It all kind of depends on the carb content for me. Bananas, 30 grams of carbs. An apple is more like 15. So yeah, oranges are probably 20 to 32. So that's pretty great. I like to eat less for more carbohydrate gain, but if you eat a lot on the bike, then use something that's a little less carb dense. because you can eat more of it. And I mean, all of my nutrition, I try to focus on real food as opposed to processed things. So I eat a lot of fruit and vegetables on a daily basis just because I like them.
Miriam, I was told that you should build up a week before your ride, a high carb diet, like have carbs every night for 1 week before. Is that a fallacy or is that true?
For me, I usually only carb load the day before, unless I'm going into like a 6-day long stage race. Like if you watch the guys at the Giro, they've got a carb load for a week leading into that. For sure, you want to put on as much as you can. Carb loading also helps you retain water. So if you're expecting to get dehydrated, it's good to carb load. For a single event, like a single day, I only do 1 day before. But I still probably, that doesn't mean I only eat salads otherwise, right? So I wouldn't like try to hit 10 grams of carbs per kilo for a week before, but I might the day before.
And to prevent cramping, other than hydration and carbs, would you recommend anything else?
So using a drink mix like Scratch Labs has like a pretty balanced electrolyte profile, so that can definitely help to prevent cramping. But if it's really hot, I will also add salt to my water bottles. So if it's like 35 degrees, I will just like add a 1/4 teaspoon of salt into my bottle. The nice thing about that is it also makes you thirsty, so it forces you to drink more, so you have less chance of getting dehydrated. So adding salt, stretching, there's kind of new research that shows that like stretching can help to reduce cramps. So if you're cramping a lot regularly, you can potentially like reduce because there's kind of 2 kinds of cramping, and stretching can like reset that nerve impulse that's telling your muscles that they're getting locked up. So if it's a quad, if your quads specifically are cramping, to pull your stand up straight and grab your foot with your hand and pull.
I'm always cramping in my hamstring, and it's always on 60 or more kilometer rides, but it's when I'm going really fast. If it's just a leisurely ride, I don't cramp.
Right.
I only cramp when I'm going fast or really trying to get somewhere quickly.
Right. So try starting incorporating hamstring activation pre-ride and like working on the hamstrings, then stretching them pre and even maybe during the ride. And then maybe like, do you ever notice that your jerseys and shorts have like white salt stains on them? Not really.
No.
Because like some people are really salty sweaters, and then you like adding sodium is really important, but you could try adding some salt to your bottles. Potassium can also be indicated in cramping. So unless you're the guy that hates bananas might work.
I've been using a lot of Gatorade. Is that
Right.
Is that good?
I personally kind of like Gatorade because it's cheap, but so I do use it sometimes. It's worth maybe looking into something like Scratch, because it does have like a really good electrolyte profile. Or Hammer makes like tablets that are really high in sodium and electrolytes, and I do sometimes, if it's really hot, take one of those pre-race.
I use Nuns. Is that any better or is that the same? I think it's called Nun.
Oh, Noon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't really used that. But I think that they have pretty good product, but they don't have calories.
But they have caffeine.
So I love caffeine.
Yeah.
Pre-ride, pre-race, I typically use caffeine. On the track, we use like caffeine tablets because they're great.
On the track, when you're riding, you've got no brakes and you've got no gears. How do you prevent from hitting each other? You're going so close to each other and there's no control other than the speed that you're actually on. How do you prevent from hitting them?
So when you're riding like in a team, for example, like team pursuit, where it's 4 riders, you go as fast as you can for 4 kilometers. We're all on exactly the same gear. So unless you're like accelerating, you're not going to run into the other person.
If you're doing a world ride and you're racing against other countries, you're trying to get ahead of them, you're going to try to go around them. So speed is important. And how do you prevent from, when you want to go around them, how do you prevent from hitting them?
Yeah.
Go off the track.
If you backpedal, you slow down. Like, so if you put pressure backwards, you'll slow down. And if you put pressure on the forwards, then you'll speed up. If you go up track, you'll slow down. If you go down track, you'll speed up. So typically, to avoid hitting somebody, you try to make space for yourself to move up track. So you can like slow down and back off. If you never want to go down, basically. Unless there's like a big space for you, you never want to try to go down, because then you're going to accelerate underneath somebody, and that's where it gets dangerous.
So you're always going above them and around them.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it looks like we have Scratch at the ride, which is great, because it's my favorite. Okay, somebody asked about nuts. I love nuts. I don't eat them on the bike because I struggle with high-fat foods when I'm riding. But I like to eat them when I'm not riding bikes. I think nutrition really ultimately comes down to a lot of preferences and making sure you fuel your exercise so that you can perform maximally in your exercise. And then the rest of your day, your life, you can kind of set your goals around, you know, whether you want to lose weight, maintain weight, or gain weight, and kind of eat around that later in your day, with the main point just being that when you're exercising, you need to eat in order to perform at your max capacity. Any other questions? Or anything that I like kind of answered, but you're not sure of still?
How many grams of carbohydrates are in a banana again?
30.
So your recommendation of it would be two bananas per hour.
Yes, I typically do drink mix. So I do like 1 bottle is 25 or 30 grams of carbs, and then 1 banana. So I'll do like 1 food item and a whole bottle, which is also the recommended amount of fluid intake on a like kind of a regular day. You should be try to aim for 1 750 ml bottle per. They're 750, 600,
Or 590.
590.
I have bottles of Gatorade too, and those are 590.
Right. So I would aim for 1 bottle of mix and 1 food item that is around 30 grams of carbs.
Okay. And protein bars, they're let's see, this one is it's 60 grams, but 21 is protein, so I'm guessing the rest is carbs. So that would be 40. Okay.
Yeah, protein on the bike isn't always great. I usually save protein for after. because it can kind of just make you feel heavy. But everybody's different, so try it in your training, and if it works for you, great.
I have a question. What would you say is a decent tip besides losing weight, getting a little bit faster on the hills? I know I need to lose a few pounds, but hills have always been the nemesis for me on the cadence and just basically being able to tackle them.
I think anticipating, so don't go into it with too heavy of a gear. So like it can be really hard to downshift in the middle of the hill if you lose all your momentum. So I guess really the answer there is momentum. Practice getting good momentum into hills because it's your friend. So if you anticipate the gear and like start to practice anticipating the gear that you're gonna want going into the hill, so you're not like making a major jump, you're gonna lose momentum a lot less quickly. And practice standing because that can kind of help. If you can do that well, that's helpful. Also, just climbing more hills.
Yeah. No, how do you practice on the getting out of the saddle for longer durations? I find that that's also, 30 seconds, 20 seconds is one thing, but going like I've seen, obviously the pros doing it where they can go for like 20 minutes or so is a whole different animal.
I mean, I personally don't think you want to climb for 20 minutes. There's a standing up, sorry. Like some people do it. There's a few key pros that you're like, oh, that's the guy that always stands up. Like Nibali. But really, if you're climbing for 20 minutes, aerodynamics comes into play too. So if you're standing the whole time, you're way less aero. So I don't really think there's much point in standing for 20 minutes.
Right.
Maybe if you're climbing like a 14% gradient in Spain, sure. We don't have anything like that around here.
That's the road.
So I think like being able to stand for 2 to 3 minutes is useful. Longer than that, you're not gonna use that around here. So just practice. If there's an escarpment climb or something near you, they're usually like 3 minutes.
Yes, Strawberry Hill's the biggest one up on Weston Road going up to Highway 9. I don't know if you're familiar with the neighborhood. Like that's the biggest hill you got in the neighborhood.
Yeah. So
Just did that.
Hill repeats are not that fun, but they're really helpful. If getting faster on hills is your goal, do hill repeats.
That's usually where I get killed. So flats, I'm okay.
Yeah. And, draft a little more on the flats so that you have a little more energy when it comes time to do the hill. That's how I race.
Okay, let's take 2 more questions and we'll call it a night. And and if anybody has any other questions, Miriam will be more than happy, I suppose, to answer them by email. Does that sound good? Okay,
Yeah,
so let's have 1 more question. 2 more questions. I don't know who said something, but
I have a question. Are you better off going with a lower gear and higher cadence, or better with a harder gear and less cadence for a longer ride? So let's say 100 kilometers. Are you better off going at a higher cadence with a lower gear, a lighter gear, or going right from the beginning with a harder gear and your cadence lower, say 60 instead of 80?
So for long
ride.
distances,
Yeah.
up the cadence.
Up the cadence.
Up the
Make it a
cadence.
lighter gear.
Especially if you're having
Yeah.
cramping problems, because you're going to decrease the muscular load. You'll increase the aerobic load, but you'll decrease the muscular load. So you have better stamina. Like think about going to the gym. If you're lifting your max deadlift, you're only going to do it once. But if you do a 60 kilo deadlift, maybe you can do it 10 times and 3 sets of it. So the lighter gear, you're going to have better endurance.
Thank you.
Okay. Last question.
If there
Okay,
is one.
Going once?
Do you recommend trying not to stand when you're climbing a hill?
Oh no, I like to stand, but I mean around here hills are 2 to 3, maybe 4 minutes. So I'll do half and half. Even when I do hill repeats, it's like the first 30 or 40 seconds I'll stand, then you sit down and grind it out, and maybe you knock it out of the park for the last 30 seconds standing again. But it's really what you're comfortable with, and get comfortable with it.
Okay.
Does that make sense? It's not that helpful. It's just like, I know when I was new to cycling, I really only sat always, and I could climb really fast seated. But then as you kind of get more comfortable moving with your bike, then you stand up more, and you just know, you just feel it, and you just go with it. That's how you ride a bike. You just go. Just do it.
Well, okay, Miriam, thank you ever so much. You've been just a whirlwind of information, and you've been so kind and so endearing. I can't begin to thank you on behalf of all of us at Kayla's Children's Center. And hopefully we can do this one more time before we go, or if anybody has any questions for you, and we'd love to have you ride with us. And I really want to give a very big shout out to Andrew Ebony for putting this together. And all of you, please go out and try to get one other rider with us, so that we can make this a really very, very successful ride again, as we did last year. Thank you very much. Stay safe. God bless everybody. And we'll see you soon. Miriam,
Thank you.
Thank you.